Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Q&A Cafe for Business One. Today our topic is running, dunning statements, collections, and letters with Alex Waddell. He is your host and your presenter, and myself, Kayla Valtins, I'll be your facilitator. I will be recording this session for learning purposes, so I will have everyone on mute for the duration of the webinar. I encourage you to type your questions in the chat box or the question box window so we can address them after the presentation portion of this webinar. One last thing before we start, we are now holding these Business One Q&As every second week on this day and this time. So please go to our resources page and scroll to the bottom where you can see the next few weeks of webinars with those registration links. The next one is on April 30th. It is how do I run and decipher the cash flow report in SAP Business One. So if you're interested, go to our resources page and I'll also give you a follow-up email with those registration details from this session. And I will put myself on mute and hand it over to Alex.
Great, thanks Kayla. Welcome everybody. So I guess first of all, I guess because we can't talk to each other, I'm just going to be one-sided, but you can please, I encourage you to type in questions. Kayla will read them out as they come up. So I was just doing a little test here and I probably got myself into a bit of trouble because I'm screen printing all of my dunning letters now, and that's tied up my Business One. So I'm just kind of clicking through it, but what I could do is just show you a sample of one of those dunning. So I'm going to sort of start from the back, but we'll talk a little bit about what the dunning statements are. So this is the end product that we're creating. Once I click through all of these, I should be able to show you how to run this job in Business One. I don't know if anybody here is actually running this today or if they are, if this is your first time doing it and you're just looking for a refresher or a new way to do it, or maybe a way to format the changes. So once again, if you have questions or feedback for me on that, feel free to enter in those questions into the chat panel. So this is our sample test environment. There's probably a ton of old payables in here because I don't apply a lot of cash. So I'm coming up with all sorts of ancient invoices from 2013, and your dunning letter format out of the box will, give you a list of all of the overdue invoices in your system, what the total balance is, what the amount due, potentially if you're charging interest on any of those invoices. And then those statements could either at your discretion be printed or emailed to your client. So is everybody clear on that, what the dunning process is? Any questions on that so far? And Kayla, just interrupt me if anybody is typing a question, because we have a small group, so I'm happy to take them as we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will, and we don't have any right now.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
So I'm logged into our demo environment. The Dunning Wizard is available through your dashboard or through your Sales AR module. So if I click on this, I can go to my Dunning Wizard either way or click it through there. And it's going to just take us through a wizard to collect the data that you want to group together to generate these statements for your customers. And I mentioned I created one to sort of test this, so it's already generated my statements, but I'm gonna do this twice for you. So I'll run through the wizard how to generate it. And then you'll see, because I've already generated mine, it's not gonna bring a result at the end. So then I'll show you how you can go back to your saved result and do a reprint or look at your dunning results. So if I start with starting a new dunning rather than loading a saved one, all of your saved ones are the ones that appear in this panel down below. I'm gonna hit the next wizard. And then you're going to want to do your date of your dunning run. Chances are that's probably today's date. It could be maybe a few days in the past. If you want to sort of run this on the 3rd of the month before the end of the prior month, that's kind of up to you. And I'm going to run all of the dunning levels. So the dunning levels sort of refer to how aggressive, like how late the invoices are in the system. So if you say this is all, we're going to just sort of run statements for everything that is overdue, and that's sort of the recommended approach. So you're probably familiar with this screen in B1 where you select your customers. At this point, you could filter out specific customers that you want to run. You'll have an additional chance to do additional filtering. But once again, if you just want to run everybody, if I click on the add button, then I have the ability to run either a range of customers based on the codes. Chances are that's probably not that useful to you. It may be useful to you to be able to run a certain customer group though. So if you are using the customer group field when you set up your customers in B1, then you would have likely in your system your own specific groups that you've determined, and then you could run dunning for a specific group. So for example, if you want to leave out employees or something like that from your dunning, that might make sense. You could just run groups at a time. Another option is if you're using properties on your customers. So the properties tab inside your customers is where you can configure any of the 64 sort of preset properties that are associated with a customer. So in this environment, we've pre-configured properties 1 through 8 to mean this. And then you could decide that you want to run customers with only specific properties associated to them. That's also useful in that you can tag multiple ones. So you could actually run more than one rather than just sort of a range or a single one like you can in the customer group. So if I hit just to select all, I'm going to bring in all of my customers. So they're just going to appear, and then I still have the ability to deselect specific ones if I don't want to dun them. So I'm going to get to the next window, and then in here, I can say that I want to find invoices with a posting date. Probably you want to leave this blank and just grab anything from the beginning of time. The same thing with the due date. And we want to run everything up into including today or perhaps a few days prior. If you want to show incoming payments that have been applied to the account, you could indicate that. Credit memos, likely you're not doing manual journal entries against your customers, but by design does, or sorry, B1 does support that. So if you are doing a business partner journal entry, if you're not sure what that is, you can feel free to put a question in the chat panel. You could include the amounts in those manual journal entries as well to show up on the dunning letter. And I'm going to hit next on here, and then we should get to the proposed data. So at this point, you're going to see everything that's outstanding and eligible to be run. So as I mentioned before, because I've already run this, it's not coming up with any data. Everything has already been flagged as done. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go back into my dunning wizard. And I'm just going to open up a previous one, the previous one I did, go to it that way. So when you get to the end of your dunning letter, you're going to see the option to save it. So that's how this particular one got saved. And then we can see here flagged by customer, every single invoice that's outstanding. So as you can see, I have an enormous amount of outstanding customers in my test environment, which probably makes sense. And then you do have the ability also to sort of deselect items at this point as well. But chances are you're just going to want to run statements for everything that's outstanding. So at this point, if I hit the next step, I'm accepting all of those. And then you have a number of choices here. So if you don't want to action this right now, you can save the selection parameter and exit. And then the next time you come in, they will be saved in that opening window the exact same way that I just opened this job. So it'll give you an opportunity to name the job, and it'll save that as a parameter recommendation that you can then execute later. And then at this point, you can decide if you want to actually execute it, if you want to print, or if you want to email, if you have your email configuration set up for your specific customers. And at this point, I'll just show you the printing. So if I were to hit the finish here, it would pop up with invoke your Windows driver to select a printer. In my case, to kind of simulate that for you, I've just printed it out to OneNote. And so this is what I started off to show you. And then this is the end result that you get. So this is built out in the report Crystal Designer in B1. So if you do want to make changes to these layouts and you have access to the Crystal Report Writer, you could do that. Or you could contact us if you need assistance with making changes. But otherwise, you'll get sort of this standard statement, and this is what you would send out to your customer. So really, it's kind of as simple as that. I'm hoping that there's questions. Either will be a really short Q&A cafe. Kayla, how's it looking out there?
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so you said this was for a list of outstanding invoices, so that means all invoices on account. They're not necessarily past due, correct?
Correct. That's based on the due.
Oh, I'm just gonna mute you for
Yeah,
feedback
so it's
here.
just
There we go.
right, exactly. Yeah, so it's just based on the due date. So technically, if you have things that are due in the future, like you've just invoiced somebody yesterday, chances are they won't show up on the dunning letter because you're usually running the dunning letter from today's date, like due as of today, or your, so let me go back if I can get to that parameter window. So because I'm saying anything as of a certain date, that is really the due date. So chances are you may want, depending on your relationship with your customers, maybe you want to show everything that's outstanding. You could set the due date into the future, and then you would also get on the report things that are not yet due if you want to let them know about those as well.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
All right, if there's no other questions, then I just wanted to thank everybody for coming, and we'll follow up with those other items. Look forward to other Q&A. Feel free to reach out to us if you have subject ideas or topic ideas you'd like to see. And yes, stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. On the April the 30th is the next one.
Great.
Okay. All right. I'll end this for all then. Thank you very much.